You know, they say blood is thicker than water, but it doesn't make you family just because you got the same blood running through your veins. Matter of fact, it be your own relatives who do you the worst sometimes. And that was the case for who is now a young man, but was just a teenager when he was sent to live with his older brother and sister-in-law in the state of Washington. A lot of the stories I cover are quite gruesome, and the details can be triggering, grotesque, and horrid. And this story is no different. But what is different is this will be the first time I cover a story where the victim is still alive to this day by the grace of Almighty God. For YouTube ad purposes, this story is for informational and educational purpose only. This is the story of Jordan Gunn. Jordan Gunn grew up with both his parents in College Park, Georgia. However, according to reports, Jordan unfortunately experienced the absence of his father as just a teen in the early 2010s. Now, in some reports, I read that his father passed away. In others, I read that his father was incarcerated. Therefore, I won't speak to the reason of his father's absence factually, but I do know he was not in Jordan's life for a while, which prompted his mother, Noni, to send Jordan to Washington to live with his older brother, 27 years old at the time, Brandon Purnell Gunn, in May 2013, who was a part of the U.S. Navy, according to my research. Noni sent Jordan to live with Brandon because she felt like he needed a father figure in his life, since Jordan was allegedly displaying some rebellious behavior. Alongside Brandon was his wife, 34-year-old Viviana Gunn. It sounds pretty harmless, right? Young teenage boy falling off track, sent him to live with his older brother who's married. He's part of the U.S. Navy. You know, when you paint the picture, you see stability, you see a role model, a pretty ideal setting for a young boy to be influenced by. You would never think that he would be tortured for not one, not two, but 3 whole months by his own brother and his brother's wife. Unfortunately, that was the case for 13-year-old Jordan. You see, it was an early Saturday morning, approximately 7 a.m. on August 24th, 2013, when Brandon and his wife, Viviana, were both taken into custody at approximately 7 a.m. from their home after the discovery of Jordan's badly battered body just the night before, laying on a park bench in Bremerton, Washington, miles away from his Silver Bear home in the 1100 block of Northwest Clollinger Court. I probably butchered that name. Forgive me if I did. Police took Jordan to Harrison Medical Center to be treated for his numerous cuts, abrasions on his head, face, chest, abdomen, back, arms, and legs, where some wounds were healed and some were still fresh, as well as infections that he developed in his hands and feet. A police report stated the injuries appeared to be caused by blunt objects, electrical cords, and other sharp objects, and they varied from fresh open wounds to wounds that were in the process of healing. You see, according to ComoNews.com, Jordan told authorities why he was on that bench and what he was experiencing at home. He provided the chilling details of these quote-unquote assault sessions that took place against him. He spoke on how he would be physically tortured for 2 to 3 hours at a time in different areas throughout the home, such as the garage, a cellar, and the bedroom. According to reports, Jordan told officials how his brother and Viviana would beat him until he was unconscious with either a baseball bat or a metal bar. He was bound to chairs with duct tape and sometimes zip ties. They would hang him by placing his hands up over his head and duct taping his hands together onto a vertical bar and a rafter in the garage, and beat him with bats and pipes all over his body. He recounted a time where his hand was placed in a bench vise. They tightened the vice jaws on his hand and then drove a nail through his hand with a hammer. They would also use the hammer to repeatedly beat on his feet so he wouldn't be able to walk. Jordan was forced to strip down to either full nudity or almost nudity and was imprisoned inside of a portable dog kennel, which was secured with a ratchet device, and he would be confined to that kennel for days on end to prevent him from escaping. According to police reports, they would leave him there without any food or water, unless it was the bottle of water that Brandon would give him, but only for it to be followed by a pill that Jordan stated would make him feel sluggish and tired, weakening him to, again, stop him from attempting to escape. There were also times both Brandon and Viviana would come in on Jordan, and instead of coming to their senses and realizing they treated him worse than zoo animals, they would sadistically spray his open wounds with rubbing alcohol just to get a reaction out of him and to get a thrill out of his reactions. But it doesn't stop there. Police also stated Jordan told them that Brandon stapled his hands with a staple gun, and Viviana would get a knife and burn the knife with a lighter and then cut his skin with the heated knife. And I do have a couple of photos of just some of Jordan's injuries that I'll place on my community tab, but I will not place that here because I don't have the patience to deal with YouTube's bullshit. Anyway, Jordan said he would face these types of consequences for hours on end whenever he would return home late or not do his chores as told. During the 2 weeks of being on the streets, Jordan was asked how was he surviving, and he said he would shoplift and sleep in abandoned buildings. Jordan told authorities that the mortifying torture he endured began in the early summer of 2013 when school just came to an end, and he was accused of stealing something. Doesn't say what specifically, but that was the start of everything when he was hit repeatedly with an extension cord. But after a few months of enduring this hellish experience, the young teen was able to muster up the strength to escape the demonic duo. It was the last time Jordan was going to be beaten on, as one day after he had been tied up for several days with duct tape and mouth being taped shut and beaten with a bat all over his body, including a focus on his private area, if you know what I mean, because his brother and Viviana found out he actually escaped the cellar and treated himself to some food when they weren't home, Jordan was able to chew through the duct tape, undo his hands, then the rest of his body, and he got up out of the cellar and finally escaped for good. Once he was able to escape, as I already mentioned, he would shoplift, sleep in abandoned buildings, and also on benches for 2 weeks. Hence, police finding him there like that. And what's sick about his disappearance for those 2 weeks is Viviana was up on Facebook talking about she praying for his safe return and called him a repeat runaway. When detectives went and searched the Gunn's residence, they said they were able to find evidence that corroborated Jordan's claims. They saw the vice and workbench where officers were able to find his blood and some of the instruments used to torture him. They found blood on the wall, the door, the bench vise, a baseball bat, and a chair. They also found the door kennel and staple gun and a strong smell of urine in a corner of the cellar where Jordan said he was forced to urinate. When detectives spoke to the callous couple, they both denied causing any harm to Jordan. When Brandon was asked about the quote-unquote sessions that Jordan told him about, Brandon stated he wasn't abusing Jordan, but referred to the sessions as quote-unquote ass whoopings in video games that he and his friends joked about. And Brandon was also asked if he ever hit Jordan at all at any point, and he said he has. He said he's hit Jordan with a belt on his behind, but no more than that and no more than 3 times. Jordan's aunt, Marsha Thomas Jones, told the Channel 2 News how destroyed her sister was, knowing who was supposed to be her son's hero was capable of doing this to him. I wanted to assume that Brandon was also Noni's son, but none of the reports I read ever referred to Brandon as her son, so I want to assume maybe he's Jordan's brother from his father's side. Not really sure, but nonetheless, we know he and Jordan are for sure siblings. Marsha said, quote, "We've been crying for days. My sister is devastated because she sent her son to an environment that she thought would help him," end quote. She also spoke of how she believed Brandon must have had to have been in a dark, broken place to be capable of such heinous acts. Relatives of the family said they had a feeling something bad was going on when they hadn't heard from Jordan or Brandon for months. They attempted to get law enforcement involved even though they were in Georgia and calling into Washington, but to no avail. Marsha believes had police just gone to do a welfare check at the very least, all of this probably could have been avoided. When neighbors were interviewed, they said they could hear the cries coming from the Gunn residence at times, but they just assumed it was one of the small children in there just crying like, kids normally do. They said they never suspected foul play was going on. On Tuesday, August 27th, 2013, Brandon and Viviana were both charged with kidnapping in the first degree, 4 counts of assault in the second degree, and unlawful imprisonment. They were held at the Kitsap County Jail with their bail set at $500,000 each, according to the county prosecutor, Cammie Lewis. After the arrest of Brandon and Viviana, Jordan was placed into foster care after he was released from the hospital. In September of 2013, both Brandon and Viviana pled not guilty to all their charges. But on November 8, 2013, both Brandon and Viviana agreed to a guilty plea, only to then turn around some days later and withdraw their guilty plea through their attorneys. It was Friday, November 15th, when Judge Anna Laurie was ready to hand down the sentence to Brandon when his attorney told the judge about Brandon's change of heart. The plea deal was worked out between the attorney and prosecutor, which would have been a sentence of more than 30 years, but that sentence had been derailed due to the withdrawal. It also derailed the sentencing of Viviana, according to court reports. Viviana's attorney, Janice LaCrosse, said she needed at least 2 weeks to discuss with her client on how she wanted to proceed. Well, a couple months later, in January of 2014, Viviana was sentenced to 375 months, which is just over 31 years, and Brandon was sentenced to 362 months, which is just over 30 years. The judge said both Brandon and Viviana were evil human beings, and she was especially happy to get Viviana up out of the county. Before being sentenced, Viviana wrote a letter to the judge wishing to withdraw her guilty plea, and she said she wanted to fight for her freedom because she was forced to take a guilty plea for something that she supposedly didn't do. But, too bad, so sad, because thankfully they're both still in prison as I speak. Sidebar, I feel like the sentence should have been far more heavier, but okay. Jordan was reunited with his mom in Atlanta in January of 2014, according to HeraldSun.com. Brandon is currently incarcerated at the Stafford Creeks Correction Center, and Viviana is at the Washington Correction Center for Women. Like I said a moment ago, I do wish that their sentences were heavier, but I guess we just got to accept it for what it is. Jordan should be about 24 years old by now. I pray that his journey of healing has been an effective one for him. Just imagine the trauma, the literal PTSD, the mental strain that has caused him at just 13 years young. And for what? Treated him less than human for what? And all I can think of is, these people couldn't have been human themselves. And physically, yes, they're clearly human, but I'm saying spiritually. No person with a good heart could ever do something like this, especially not to no child. And especially not to no child that's literally your family member, your little brother at that. And then you let your weak-ass wife do him dirty too. And now both of y'all ain't even together no more. Y'all can't see each other. Y'all ain't living with each other. Y'all can't do nothing together. And guess what else? Viviana has other children. She's a whole mother to like 2 other children of her own that I believe, according to reports, don't even belong to Brandon. And she didn't treat them like that. Neither did Brandon. So, imagine just the sheer terror that Jordan's mom probably still has to this day, and that she had when it comes to, leaving Jordan with anyone or him being around anybody else other than her after that. It's really a sad thing to think about. So, thankfully, I don't have to end this video saying RIP to this young man, but still, nonetheless, a very sad story. Of course, let me know what you think about this story in the comments. Let's have a conversation. Much love and healing energy to Jordan, especially and his mom. I pray that 11 years later, you guys are living a much healthier and happier life.